At Starbound, we like to tell stories the human way, not with artificial slop or AI voices. What's HFY without humanity? So, subscribe if you want to keep it that way. My name is Dan, and let's begin. The holotank shimmered, a three-dimensional scar of cobalt blue and blood red suspended in the muted light on the Resilience command deck. The Cynos system model was dying. Predatory red icons, angular as shrike beaks, swarmed a beleaguered cluster of blue spheres. The Scourge. Below the holographic chart, the chronometer ticked down, calm and relentless. 11 minutes, 10 minutes and 59 seconds. Admiral Corollas Rayner stood motionless, with her hands clasped behind her back, a contrast to the warship's thrumming deck plates. Patience and pressure forged her stillness. The weight of command had etched fine lines around her eyes. The red tide advanced, a silent predator consuming a star system. Cynosian 5th and 6th fleets are collapsing, Commander Cato Serrano said. He stood at her shoulder, his grip on the command dais railing bone-crushing. The shield frequencies have desynced. The Scourge tears them apart, piecemeal. Rayner's focus remained on the holotank, on the pulsing icons representing the 50 million souls on the garden world of Cynos. Assembly command? Still broadcasting standard doctrine, Serrano bit out. Encirclement patterns, coordinated volley fire, honorable tactics. They are trying to fight a tide with a sword. They are fighting the only way they know how, Rayner said. It's failing, Serrano pressed. Projections are holding firm. Cordon breaks in 10 minutes, 10 seconds. The Scourge will achieve orbital superiority in 15. Planetary bombardment begins shortly after. Rayner gave a single, minute nod. She had processed the numbers herself, searching for a variable she had missed, a weakness to exploit, a path to a clean victory. The search confirmed her fears. The Assembly's rigid, centuries-old doctrine were a beautiful, crafted set of rules for a game the Scourge ignored. The Scourge operated by its own brutal logic, favoring swarms and consumption over elegant arrays and the sacred laws of celestial engagement. They were a biomechanical virus that consumed, expanded, and destroyed. We have a single option, Admiral, Serrano said, his voice low. They had discussed it in the briefing, a theoretical gambit filed under catastrophic strategic alternatives. Unanchored translation, Rayner said. The words felt like grinding gears in her throat. A forbidden tactic, outlawed by every signatory to the Galactic Assembly, including humanity. Standard faster-than-light travel required a stable gravity well to anchor the entry and exit points, a process that bent space-time in a predictable, controlled manner. An unanchored jump was a brute force severance of space-time, a raw, uncontrolled tear in reality, creating a violent backlash of gravitational and dimensional shear. It was the tactical equivalent of using a nuclear device to clear a jammed doorway. Effective, but monstrously destructive to the frame. It's the only way to get the fleet inside their array, Serrano pressed, his eyes fixed on hers. A standard jump would place us at the system's edge, too far to reach the planet in time. But a micro-jump, a frontal assault, we could materialize in the heart of their fleet. The spatial distortion alone would shatter half their ships before we even fire a shot. The Assembly has forbidden its use for a reason, Commander, Rayner stated. The resulting reality quake could destabilize the system's primary. It will create a permanent space-time scar. It is a violation of cosmic law. The Scourge is a violation of cosmic law, Serrano shot back. They answer diplomacy with violence. They communicate only through annihilation. What's more important, a pristine copy of the rulebook or 50 million people the Scourge will sterilize from orbit? Rayner met his gaze, weighing the cost, the fallout, the precedent. Such luxuries belong to politicians and philosophers. The record will show, she said, her voice so low the bridge crew leaned in to hear. that the human expeditionary fleet exhausted all conventional options. She turned back to the holotank, where the red icons were now bleeding through the Cynosian defensive line's last vestiges. 6 minutes. The helmsman's fingers tensed on his console. The tactical officer looked up from his screen. They all knew. Rayner drew a slow breath. "Commander, log the Cynosian's High Command's official protest, received this morning, forbidding us from taking unorthodox action." Serrano tapped a sequence on his console. "Logged, Admiral. Log my formal reply, overriding their protest under the Assembly emergency mandate for the preservation of sapient life. Logged. Signal the fleet. All ships to prepare an unanchored FTL burn. Target coordinates right there." She pointed a steady finger at the Scourge Array's dense red heart, the storm's epicenter. Pride sharpened Serrano's features. "Aye, Admiral." He turned to the communications officer. "Send it. Priority 1. Rayner looked at the chronometer. 5 minutes and 12 seconds. "On my mark, helmsman. Conduct the burn." The transition resembled a schism more than a jump. One moment, the Resilience occupied the cold, clean void of interstellar space. The next, reality tore open around it. The ship convulsed as the laws of physics buckled around it. Emergency lighting strobed across the bridge as the primary systems flickered, fighting to reassert themselves against the raw, untamed energies of the translation. Through the forward view screen, space had become a roiling, nauseating canvas of bruised purple and fractured light. They had arrived. "Report," Rayner's voice cut through the chaos. "We're through," the helmsman gasped, fighting his controls. "Space-time integrity at 35%. It's trying to snap back." "Serrano, damage to the Scourge." Serrano was staring at the hostile contact's display, and he caught his breath. "My God, the distortion wave. It's propagating." A visible wave of gravitational chaos radiated from the human fleet's arrival point. Reality imploded. Scourge ships, biomechanical horrors of twisted metal and organic tissue that glowed to vent waste heat, were unmade. Hulls contorted at unnatural angles, energy signatures winked out of existence as sudden, localized singularities crushed their reactors. Ships ceased to be. Their matter smeared across a dimension beyond normal physics. On the Cynosian flagship Eternity's Watch bridge, alarms shrieked. The ship lurched, its ancient frame groaning as the reality quake washed over it. Instruments designed to measure stellar phenomena went haywire. "What was that?" the Cynosian admiral demanded, his slender frame taut. "Report! Was that a Scourge superweapon?" "Negative, Admiral," his sensor tech cried out, his voice trembling. "The energy signature. It's human. The fleet just arrived inside the enemy array." Before the Cynosian officer could process this, the human ships opened fire. Their cannons, crude projectile weapons by the assembly's standards, proved effective at close range. Magnetic accelerator cannons spat slugs of hyperdense metal that punched through the weakened Scourge hulls. Missiles, guided by what the assembly considered reckless, aggressive AIs, jinked through the debris to detonate deep within the enemy's wounded command ships. It was a systematic butchery. The unanchored jump crippled the Scourge's network consciousness, their primary strategic advantage, jamming their hive mind with psychic and subspatial noise. Their once coordinated pattern dissolved into a disorganized rout. Rayner watched the holographic chart. Target their command nodes, prevent their regrouping. The orders were crisp and economical. The human fleet, smaller and technically simpler than the elder species' forces, fought like a wolf pack, each ship an extension of a single, unified will. Within minutes, the tactical reality had inverted. The Scourge, moments from annihilating the Cynosian defense, now broke and fled. The red icons on the holotank scattered, retreating back toward the system's edge. The strobing emergency lights on the Resilience Bridge gave way to the primary system's steady, calm glow. The deck plates ceased their shuddering. Outside, space resumed its silent blackness, littered with the enemy fleet's twisted, silent wreckage. "Scourge are in full retreat," Serrano reported, his voice hoarse with adrenaline. "Cynosian fleet is... They're holding position. They seem... stunned." Rayner nodded. "As expected. Get me a channel to the Assembly High Directorate, Priority 1. She smoothed the front of her uniform. Greetings, Starbound travelers. While we wait to find out what the fallout is for that unorthodox move, a very quick intermission to say, guys, if you're enjoying this story, hit that like button. It helps the channel immensely. Your support means all the world to us, and all the universe as well. Okay, enough of that. Back to the story. The assembly chamber was a grand, soaring space, but the holographic projection made it feel small and claustrophobic. Towering figures representing the galaxy's elder species looked down upon the solitary image of Admiral Rayner, her form crisp and unwavering in the room center. High Council Zahale of Synos stood at the primary lectern, his tall, willow body held rigid. His species valued art, philosophy, and an unbending adherence to principle. "Cosmic barbarism!" Zahale's voice, usually a melodic baritone, echoed in the vast, slender chamber. "This term alone describes what we have witnessed today. The humans, in their reckless pursuit of victory at any cost, they committed an act of unparalleled desecration." He gestured dramatically, and a new image appeared beside Rayner's hologram. A swirling vortex of corrupted data, a visual representation of the sensor readings from the Synos system. A deep, angry purple swirled beside her, a wound in the universe's fabric. "This is the legacy of humanity's victory," Zahale continued. "A space-time scar, an unhealable lesion on the continuum. Our deepest cosmological models confirm it will persist indefinitely, a permanent monument to their hubris. They saved a world by poisoning the universe." Delegates turned. Murmurs rippled through the assembled delegates. The Kelmor, beings of energy, flickered. The Verdani, plant-like sentience, rustled their great photosynthetic fronds. Rayner remained motionless. "Admiral Rayner," Zahale said, turning to her hologram, "do you have any defense for this atrocity? Any justification for unleashing a forbidden weapon that has irrevocably damaged the structure of our reality?" Rayner's image met his gaze, unflinching. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm and clear. "High Counselor, my mandate, which this assembly ratified, was to preserve the Cynosian people and prevent the Synos system's fall to the Scourge." She paused for a beat. "The records show I have done so. The 50 million inhabitants of your world are alive. Your fleets, though damaged, remain intact. We repulsed the Scourge. My statement is complete." The chamber fell silent. Zahale was momentarily speechless. He spluttered. "You admit it. You admit to this perversion of physics." "I acknowledge using the tools required to fulfill my mission," Rayner replied. "The Scourge was 10 minutes from orbital superiority. Only this tool was sufficient for the task." A deep, resonant voice, like grinding stones, rumbled through the chamber. The voice was General Amador's of the Grendel, a massive warrior sheathed in overlapping layers of grey osteoderms. "The High Council is correct," Amador stated, swiveling his heavy head to look at Zahale. "The humans' tactic was brutal. It was messy and dishonorable." He paused, then turned his gaze to the rest of the assembly. "It was also successful. The Scourge follows its own physical laws when it suits them. It operates on principles alien to honor. It acts with predatory intent, tying our hands with sacred doctrines while a predator is at our throats is suicide disguised as principle. Zahel's expression hardened. General Amador, we know your species' penchant for pragmatism, but there are lines that demand respect. If we become the monsters we fight, what are we preserving? Our existence, Amador rumbled. Dead principles offer cold comfort to dead civilizations. We oppose this, Zahel declared. He raised a hand. I call for a vote to condemn the human expeditionary fleet's actions and for the galaxy's safety to exile the human species from the Galactic Assembly and forbid them from entering Assembly space. Effective immediately. General Amador made a harsh, grating sound of disgust. Fools. The lights on the delegate roster shifted from neutral white to affirmative green. The Kelmore, the Verdani, the Sinosians. A single light, the Grendels, switched to red. Zahel turned back to Rayna. The Assembly has spoken, Admiral. We terminate your alliance. Your fleet will withdraw from Synos and all Assembly territories immediately. You are to return to your home system and remain there. Do you understand? Understood, High Chancellor. Her hologram flickered once, and then she vanished. On the Resilience Bridge, only the ship's low hum stirred the silence. Every crew member stood rigid at their post. They're exiling us. Serrano spat the words. His hands clenched into fists. He stalked the dais. After we just saved their capital, we bled for them. We broke our rules, used a weapon we all feared. And for what? To be cast out like pariahs? Amador was right. They're fools. That is enough, Commander, Rayna said, her voice sharp. She scanned the tactical plot as the human ship's blue icons began their slow, deliberate turn away from Synos. They were forming up for the long march home. Enough! Serrano spun to face her. Admiral, they spat in our faces! They are terrified, Rayna corrected him, her voice softening slightly. What we did today is beyond their comprehension. To them, the universe's laws are immutable. We just showed them that they can break. It's like a child learning for the first time that their parents can lie. The foundation of their world has cracked, and they blame the person who revealed the crack. So we just accept this, turn tail and run. We are to follow orders, Rayna said. We are a military fleet, Commander, an extension of our government. We follow policy. We execute it. Our new orders are to return to the Sol system. That is what we will do. She looked at him, and for a moment the lines around her eyes deepened. This war is bigger than their pride, Cato, and ours. Let them have their fleeting victory. Serrano fell silent. The planet Synos shrank in the view screen. A beautiful blue marble they had paid a terrible price to protect. He imagined the anger of the 10,000 souls on the ship, of the 100,000 in the fleet, all directed at the people they had just saved. The crew will have questions, Admiral. They need only obey, Rayna replied, turning back to her console. Just like you. She brought up the fleet readiness schematic. All ships reported ready for transit. With a final look at the system they were leaving behind, she gave the command, her voice flat, mechanical. Helmsman, set course for Sol. Engage FDL on my mark. The fleet, a silent armada of grey warships, oriented itself toward the long, dark road home. Weeks later, in a star system bordering the Grendel territories from which the humans had withdrawn, the Assembly fleet prepared for battle. Command fell to Synosian Admiral Zalen, who had written the Assembly's standard text on classical military doctrine. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Principle of Light. The enemy was a scourge armada of equal size, and Zaylen laid a theoretically flawless trap. He arranged his ships in a flawless crescent array, designed to envelop the enemy and destroy them with concentrated, overlapping fields of fire. The strategy, honed over centuries of honorable warfare against conventional opponents, was beautiful, exact, and utterly useless. The Scourge fleet advanced in a chaotic, decentralized swarm, and then they employed a tactic beyond Zaylen's textbooks. They jumped. They executed controlled micro-jumps of a few hundred kilometers, each jump emitting a blast of subspatial static that blinded local sensors, a side effect assembly science had dismissed as simple drive interference. One moment, a Scourge cruiser was in the center of Zaylen's targeting solution. The next, it was behind his battle line, its biomechanical cannons tearing into the vulnerable rear armor of a Cynosian destroyer. The crescent array became a liability. Ships turning to fire on the enemy swarming among them risked hitting their own comrades. The assembly command channels erupted. "They're inside our cordon! All ships break formation! Independent firing solutions!" It was too late. The Scourge's seemingly random jumps were a coordinated predatory dance, dismantling the assembly fleet ship by ship. The hive mind communicated orders instantly, each ship knowing its role. While the assembly fleet was a collection of instruments trying to play a symphony from sheet music, the Scourge was a single organism acting on murderous instinct. From his command center on the assembly's capital ship, High Counselor Zahale watched the command hololith as the blue icons of his fleet vanished at an alarming rate. "Why are the doctrines failing?" he demanded of the liaison officer. "Admiral Zaylen is a master of spatial dynamics." "The movements follow a logic that eludes us, High Counselor," the officer stammered. "They defy all predictive models. It's like they know our strategies before we employ them." The battle was a rout. Admiral Zaylen ordered a full retreat, but the Scourge harried his fleeing ships, picking off stragglers. The assembly lost over 40 ships, a devastating blow to the fleet tasked with defending the entire sector. In the Spartan quiet of her quarters aboard the Resilience, Corollas Rayner reviewed the casualty reports from the Battle of Cynos. Her victory carried its own cost. She lost 16 officers and 210 crew to the sheer physical trauma of reality reasserting itself around them. She read each name, committing them to the silent, ever-growing memorial in her mind. A chime at her door. "Enter." Commander Serrano stepped inside, his jaw tight. He held a slate. "We've just received the report from the Assembly's engagement in the Typhon sector," he said, his voice clipped. "The Scourge mauled the Assembly, lost 40 ships, including 5 capital cruisers. The Scourge used unpredictable micro-jumps to bypass their arrays entirely." He allowed himself a small, bitter smile. "Looks like their honorable tactics are failing them." Rayner looked up from the memorial file, her expression weary. "I find no satisfaction in this, Cato. Those are allies dying. Their failure is the galaxies." "They ceased to be our allies," Serrano countered. "They made that abundantly clear. They're hypocrites who would rather lose a war honorably than win it with the help of barbarians." "And what would you have me do?" Rayner asked, her voice dangerously soft. "Turn the fleet around and demand an apology? Rub their noses in their failure? Our mandate has changed. Our duty is to the Sol system now, to our own people. Pride is irrelevant to that duty." She gestured for the slate. Serrano handed it over. Rayner scanned the after-action report, tracking the complex data streams. Serrano watched her, and the tightness in his jaw eased. As he was about to leave, she froze, hovering a finger over the slate. She zoomed in on a specific telemetry reading, her brow furrowing. "What is it, Admiral?" "The battle data from Cynos," she murmured, more to herself than to him. She cross-referenced it with the new report from Typhon. Look at this, right after our jump. For 1.8 seconds, there was a total dropout in the Scourge network's telemetry. A blind spot. We assumed it was sensor ghosting from the reality quake. And? Serrano asked, leaning closer. And the same thing happened at Typhon, she said, pointing to a similar data anomaly. Every time one of their ships executed a microjump, the network experienced a fractional second dropout. The signature is identical. She looked up from the slate, her gaze distant. A fringe R&D project from before humanity joined the assembly. A theory, dismissed as fanciful, about consciousness-based subspatial drives. They're doing more than just jumping, she whispered. The jump itself. It's a side effect of their thought process, something integral to their hive consciousness. She marked the anomaly for further analysis. Serrano watched her, his frustration forgotten. Their duty was now to their own people, and understanding the enemy was paramount, regardless of the galaxy's ignorance. The collapse was faster than anyone had predicted. With the human fleet gone, a massive hole opened in the assembly's defensive line. The Scourge, ever the opportunists, poured through it. Their target was the Grendel primacy. On the Grendel warship Ironhide's bridge, General Amador watched the battle space projection, his massive form exuding a dangerous calm. The Scourge systematically outmaneuvered his fleets, nearly cutting off his forces. They fought with a newfound intelligence, a terrifying adaptability. They were learning.
They're using our own tactics against us,
his second-in-command growled, his bone plates shifting.
They analyzed the data from the Typhon exchange and have already developed counters.
They learn, Amador rumbled in agreement. We remain shackled by tradition. In a heated emergency session of the assembly, Amador's holographic image was a grim specter of reality. My front is collapsing, he stated bluntly, dispensing with all pleasantries. The Scourge has adapted to your clean strategies. They anticipate every move. Your honorable warfare is a recipe for our collective extinction. We are losing. High Counselor Zahale, his face seeming thinner, his complexion paler than it had been a week ago, stood at his lectern. The pressure was clearly mounting, but his ideological rigidity remained. We note your report, General, Zahale said, his tones strained but still condescending. However, several of our analysts suggest this is merely a failure of nerve on the Grendel front, rather than a failure of doctrine. Perhaps if your forces showed more discipline. Amador let out a short, sharp bark of Grendel laughter. It was a terrifying sound.
Discipline,
he echoed, his voice dripping with contempt. My people have held the line against cosmic horrors for 10,000 years, while your ancestors were still painting on cave walls. Counselor, save your lectures on discipline for your strategists. They desperately need a lesson in reality. He cut the transmission and left Zahale standing in stunned, indignant silence. But Zahale's self-righteous certainty was a fortress built on sand, and the tide was rising. 3 days later, the situation escalated. A long-range sensor station on the galaxy's fringe, one of the few remaining operational, screamed a single, terrifying alert before it went silent. A fleet of Scourge scouts, faster and stealthier than any previously encountered, broke through the final defensive line on a direct, unswerving course. On the main command hololith in the assembly chamber, a young Cynosian analyst plotted their projected trajectory. A thin red line shot across the vast star chart, bisecting sector after sector. It intersected with a single point of significance. Their destination is the capital, the analyst said, his voice barely a whisper. Galactic center. This world. A wave of cold dread washed over the chamber. "Time to impact?" Zahale asked, his voice tight. The analyst ran the numbers. The calculation was simple. The answer was horrifying. "Based on their sustained velocity, we project planetary annihilation in under 20 capital standard days." Zahale turned to his own strategic command. "Our options?" The senior Sinosian tactician looked down, his composure gone.
"Aye, Counselor. With our current doctrines, our probability of successfully repelling the main fleet is 0.
Zahale stared at the red line, the death sentence of his civilization, of everything he had sworn to protect. For the first time, his composure shattered. He gripped the lectern, knuckles showing white. The universe he understood, one governed by laws, principles, and honor, was about to be erased by a force operating outside those things. His beautiful ideals would soon be rendered into cosmic dust. The Assembly's emergency session felt more like a wake than a debate. The Grand Command Hololith, normally a tapestry of blue and gold, was now an encroaching sea of crimson. The Scourge Vanguard's red line crept closer with every passing second, a dagger aimed at the galactic core. The delegates were silent, their usual eloquence replaced by a profound collective fear. General Amador's hologram materialized, his stony presence a stark contrast to the quiet panic. He spoke at once. "The Scourge Vanguard is a feint," he announced, his voice a low rumble that commanded attention. "My intelligence confirms their main fleet is massing behind them, preparing for a final overwhelming push. We lack the ships to stop them. Our doctrines have failed. Our commanders have failed us. We have failed." He let the words sink in, a bitter medicine they swallowed. "A single hope of survival remains," Amador continued, and he swept his gaze across the chamber until it settled on High Counselor Zahale. "A tool we discarded out of fear and pride." He made a formal gesture. "I, General Amador of the Grendel Primacy, do hereby make a formal motion before this assembly. Rescind the human species' exile and transmit a plea for their immediate assistance." The silence that followed was absolute. All eyes turned to Zahale. He was the architect of the exile, the staunchest defender of the principles humanity had violated. The motion was a direct repudiation of everything he stood for. Zahale stared at the hololith. The red line inched closer to the icon representing the capital. A secondary projection, a fainter line, intersected with the familiar blue-green world of Sinos, his homeworld. The scourge would consume everything. His rigid posture seemed to slump, the weight of billions of lives settling upon his shoulders. He wanted to preserve the galaxy's soul, but what good was a soul without a body to house it? In that moment, he understood the terrible, simple calculus that Admiral Rayner must have faced over his world. The choice between a poisoned universe and an empty one. He swallowed. It was the hardest thing he had ever done. His pride, his principles, his entire worldview. It all crumbled to dust. "Authorize the call," he whispered, his voice hoarse, broken. Tell them we need them." Nearly a month into its long journey home, the Resilience was a world unto itself. A quiet island of routine in the vast empty ocean between stars. The rage had cooled into a stoic resolve. They were going home. The alert was jarring, a high-priority klaxon that had remained silent since the Battle of Sinos. On the bridge, all heads turned to the communications station. "Admiral," the comms officer said, her eyes widening slightly. It's It's a Priority 1 hail from the Assembly High Directorate. Encryption codes match. It's from High Counselor Zahale himself. A murmur went through the bridge. A grim, triumphant smirk formed on Cato Serrano's face. Rayna, reviewing engine diagnostics, looked up, her expression unchanging. "Piper to my ready room, Lieutenant. Commander Serrano, with me." In the small, functional room off the main bridge, Rayna stood before the large communications monitor, her hands clasped behind her back. Serrano stood beside her, arms crossed, the smirk remaining fixed on his lips. The screen flickered to life, and Zahale's image appeared. He looked diminished. The self-righteous statesman had vanished. In his place was a tired, desperate being, the weight of his failure pressing down on him. His ornate robes seemed to hang off his slender frame, and shadows haunted his eyes, making them hollow. He opened his mouth to speak, but for a moment words failed him. He seemed to be struggling with the sheer magnitude of his own humiliation. "Admiral Rayna," he began, his voice strained. He avoided her eyes, instead focusing on a point somewhere over her shoulder. The Assembly has convened. We have reevaluated the situation." He took a breath, and when he spoke again, the words came in a rush, stripped of all their former arrogance. "The scourge has broken through our lines. A vanguard is en route to the capital. Their main fleet is following. Our projections show we are powerless to stop them. We were wrong. Our strategies, our principles, they are insufficient. We were fools, blinded by pride." He lifted his head, meeting her eyes on the screen. They held a desperate, pleading shame. "On behalf of the Galactic Assembly, I formally rescind the order of exile. I apologize for our condemnation. We were wrong. Admiral, we are begging you, please come back. The galaxy needs your help. We need the Death Worlders." Serrano's smirk broadened. He glanced at Rayna, expecting to see a flicker of triumph, a moment of satisfaction. Her expression remained a mask. Zahale's painful plea met with silence. When the High Counselor fell silent, his desperate appeal hanging in the air between them, she looked past the apology, the begging, the groveling. She set aside the history, the betrayal, the vindication. Her focus was absolute. She looked at the beaten man on her screen and made a single, simple request. Her voice as calm and steady as the stars outside. "High Counselor, transmit your latest tactical data." Zahale, stunned by her response, could only nod mutely. The data stream began almost immediately, a torrent of information pouring into the Resilience's computers. Rayna watched the progress bar on a secondary screen, her mind already shifting from politics to strategy. The moment the transmission was complete, she terminated the link, leaving Zahale's pleading face to dissolve into static. She turned to Serrano, whose smirk vanished, replaced by grudging admiration. "Cato, get our analysts on that data. I want a full tactical breakdown of the Scourge's new movements. Find their patterns and their weaknesses. I want it yesterday." "Aye, Admiral." She strode from the ready room onto the bridge, her arrival drawing the immediate, silent attention of every crew member. She stepped onto the command dais and keyed the fleet-wide comms. Her calm, resolute voice filled every corridor, every mess hall, every engine room of the 120 ships in her fleet. "Attention, all hands. This is the Admiral." She paused. "The mission has changed. Our orders to return to Sol are rescinded. The Galactic Assembly has requested our assistance in the capital's defense." She stated the new reality with the simple, unadorned power of fact. "All ships will come about. New course, Galactic Center, maximum sustainable velocity. The work continues." She cut the comm. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then a determined ripple of activity spread through the bridge, an echo of the wave that was now surging through the entire armada. Helmsmen laid new courses, navigators confirmed trajectories, engineers began coaxing more power from their reactors. Across the void, 120 human warships, acting as one, began a slow, graceful, and utterly implacable turn. The long march home was over. They were going back to war. The human expeditionary fleet arrived at the capital's outer perimeter to a scene of desperate defense. A dozen losing skirmishers had shattered the Assembly's forces, their elegant ships scarred and pitted. They were holding, but just barely, a fragile line of defense against an overwhelming tide of red. As the Resilience took its position at the head of the newly arrived human formation, a single encrypted message cut through the chatter. It was the Grendel flagship, the Ironhide. General Amador's deep rumbling voice relayed the simple message. "Glad you could make it." Rayna stood on her bridge, watching the battle space coalesce on the holotank. She keyed her response, her voice just as direct. "Let's get to work." Hours melted away in the Resilience's strategy room. Rayna and Serrano stood over a strategic holotank. The combined data from Cynos, Typhon, and the Assembly's latest reports swirling around them in a storm of light and information. "Their adaptability is just the surface," Serrano said, tracing a finger through a projection of the Scourge's attack patterns. "They're predictive. It's like they're learning in real time, but faster. Processing tactical data at this speed is beyond any conventional species. Because their method is different from processing," Rayna murmured, her eyes fixed on the anomaly she had flagged days earlier. She overlaid the data from the unanchored jump at Cynos with the telemetry from the Scourge's microjumps. The signatures were a perfect match. The brief 1.8-second network dropout, the psychic and subspatial static. "Cato," she said, her voice electric with discovery. "Their jumps are a physical manifestation of thought rather than travel." Serrano looked at her, confused. "Ma'am?" "It's a thought process," she explained, her hands moving rapidly to manipulate the data. "The hive mind. It's more than a communications network. It exists in a state of subspatial entanglement. To think, to process, to decide on a new strategy, they have to briefly dip into a higher order dimension. The microjump is the physical manifestation of that process. It's the Scourge's thinking." Serrano's eyes widened in comprehension. "So every time they jump, they reevaluate the entire battle space?" "Exactly. And our unanchored jump at Cynos," Rayna continued, a grim smile touching her lips for the first time in weeks, "created the expected gravitational shear. It also flooded their higher dimension with so much raw energy that it blinded them. We crashed their consciousness." The plan bloomed in her mind, fully formed, audacious, reckless, and their only chance. "The Assembly fleet is a liability in a direct engagement," she said, her voice hardening. "But they can be an effective tool." She began rearranging the icons on the holotank. "We'll use them as bait, have them execute a series of rigid, predictable, and utterly suicidal maneuvers. The Scourge will jump to counter them, to process the new data, and every time they jump, they're momentarily blind." Serrano finished, his face lit with a fierce, predatory grin. "Exactly," Rayna confirmed. "We will use the Assembly's honorable tactics to force the Scourge into a specific deployment. We'll make them think over and over until we can predict the exact moment and location of their command node's next jump, and when it materializes, we'll be waiting for it," Serrano said. Rayna nodded, her expression once again one of calm, lethal focus. "Transmit the plan to the Assembly. Emphasize that the maneuvers will require extraordinary discipline and courage to execute. Tell them to prepare to follow our lead. Their obedience must be absolute. High Counselor Zahale stood in the capital's central command, watching the human plan unfold on his own hololith. The instructions were madness. Rayna was ordering the assembly fleet's pride to perform maneuvers that were, by any conventional measure, tactical suicide. She wanted them to expose their flanks, to overextend their lines, to practically invite the Scourge to annihilate them. It was a strategy of weakness and sacrifice, everything he despised.
"This is insane,"
his own admiral whispered beside him.
"The humans are asking us to throw our ships away."
Zahale looked at the battle space projection. The Scourge fleet was a relentless red tide. The projected path of their advance was a line of annihilation that ran straight through this command center, through his homeworld, through everything he held dear. He thought of Rayna's calm, impassive face. He thought of the terrible choice she had made over Synos, a choice he now understood with gut-wrenching clarity. She trusted her terrible calculus. Now she was asking him to do the same. He had to trust the unorthodox, the woman who broke his most sacred law, the Death Welder. "Give the order," Zahale said, his voice shaking but firm. "All ships are to comply with the human battle plan immediately." The assembly fleet moved. Like pawns in a grand cosmic game, they executed the seemingly illogical maneuvers. And the Scourge, as Rayna had predicted, took the bait. They micro-jumped, again and again, shifting their formation to exploit the openings the assembly fleet provided. The hive mind was thinking, processing, confident in its superiority. They were leading it into a trap of its own making. With every jump, the human analysts on the Resilience refined their prediction, narrowing down the location of the enemy's command ship. "We have them," Serrano announced, his voice tight with tension. On the Resilience's main screen, a targeting reticle flashed over an empty patch of space. "Predictive model is at 99.8% certainty. Their command node will materialize at these coordinates in 10 seconds. Rayna stood on the dais, a point of absolute stillness in the storm of activity. "All strike group ships," she commanded, her voice ringing with cold authority. "Fire on my mark." The seconds ticked down. The bridge was utterly silent. 3, 2, 1. Mark. Just as she spoke, a massive Scourge vessel, a biomechanical leviathan, pulsing as it vented excess energy, tore its way back into normal space at the target location. It materialized directly into a converging wave of human torpedoes and kinetic slugs. Before the Scourge command ship could raise shields or process the ambush, the first volley of human munitions slammed into its hull, followed a microsecond later by a dozen more. The ship convulsed, its organic components flashing and burning. The chain reaction ripped through its core, and the monstrous vessel erupted into a silent, spectacular blossom of destruction. Across the battle space, the effect was instantaneous. The Scourge fleet, deprived of its central consciousness, fell into disarray. Their coordinated dance became a clumsy, panicked scramble. Some ships froze entirely, others fired blindly at their own kind. Their greatest strength had become their ultimate vulnerability. On the assembly monitors, Zahale watched breathless as the red icons flickered and died. They broke the relentless tide. He opened a channel, his voice filled with an awe that bordered on religious reverence. "Admiral Rayna, we owe you everything. We were fools. You have saved us all." On the Resilience's bridge, Rayna barely registered his words. She was already scanning the retreating enemy fleet, her mind already calculating the next move. She gave a small, sharp nod at the holotank, acknowledging the victory for a fraction of a second, before moving on. The battle was won. The war continued. She turned to her commander, her voice tired but firm, carrying the immense, unending weight of her duty. "Cato," she said, "capture their retreat vectors. The work continues."